Hermeticism, and how that is the kind of foundation of the astrology that we practice today.
Oh yeah, look, Hermes Trismegistus means Hermes the three times uh magistus, magnificent, magus, it's the Hermes the three times wise, or Hermes the three times great, and we moderners, I'm actually doing a talk. Is it, this may be my, no, I'm doing a talk this fall that I just wrote the piece up for it, but I don't think it's the one in the at the AA conference. But we moderners tend to be dismissive of Mercury, not not that we not that we are dismissing it, but we treat Mercury as a lightweight. We treat Mercury as
Mm,
the trickster. We treat Mercury as clever, witty. I mean, and of course, Mercury is all these things, but we forget that Mercury's primary job, in all the Greek gods, they had jobs. His primary job was to guide souls through, the journey
yeah.
from in between worlds.
Well, he
That
was a
was some
psychopomp, wasn't he, Rick?
a
I mean, that,
psychopomp.
yeah,
That was some serious shit,
yeah,
you know? And that is really, in some ways, alchemical itself. And I have to just do a very quick disclaimer, because I'm not incredibly well educated in the history and details of alchemy. I know enough about it to be dangerous, and I understand the
yeah,
concepts about it probably better than some people who know all the details. But as astrologers, that's what we are. We are alchemists. I have people who sometimes ask me, well, as an astrologer and you see clients, is that like therapy? And I go, well, there are many therapists who are astrologers, and there are astrologers who are therapists, but I chose not to be a therapist. I chose to be a catalyst. And that's what alchemy is about, because an alchemical reaction cannot occur unless the right ingredient is added at the right time to precipitate or to
yeah,
catalyze that particular action that then does the transformation, transmutation of, ostensibly, lead into gold, but we know that
yeah.
that's really, base three-dimensional superstition of materialism into pure consciousness, the sun. And
But
so there's why astrology and alchemy are so
yeah,
integrated.
I think it's important to understand the difference between transmutation and transformation. Do you not?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm not sure. There's a part of me here that wants to go run to my etymology dictionary, but I think the key difference is the difference in the words form and mutate, because a transformation is basically like leaves falling from the tree. One morphs into the other, where a
Something different.
transmutation
Yeah.
has to go into the darkness, it has to go into the death realm, it has to go into some place where magic occurs, that's very different than just something transforming into something else.
Yeah, from my understanding is transmutation is one form transmuting into another form, but for me, transformation is a complete change. It's sort of something dies to be reborn. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I want to say yes, just for the sake of this discussion, but it sounds to me like that, like you stated that backwards, because it's, to me, it's transmutation that requires the death and rebirth. Transformation is a gradual
Hmm.
process. But I don't know. But I think
Yeah,
that
no,
those
it's
are
just
two key
interesting
words.
because I think that, I mean, it's just interesting what you're saying about astrology and being the catalyst, because I think that's the philosopher's stone, isn't it? Is when you have a client and they have a massive breakthrough about who they really are. And that's
And
that's
what creates that breakthrough? There's only one thing that,
Understand. It,
yeah, you go ahead, say it.
it's understanding.
It's
It's that.
understanding. I would say, I would use the word awareness,
Yes.
but it's the same concept, that there is only one thing that on the metaphysical level is catalytic, and that is an alteration or change in awareness. And that's why, as astrologers, the practice that we have stepped into, and I think many astrologers don't understand this, and many astrologers practice a craft that's not what I'm interested in doing. I don't give a crap about prediction. I'm
Mm,
sorry. And I'm not taking that away from being a piece of the astrological puzzle. But I'm much less interested in saying something before it happens. That's what prediction is.
yeah,
Than
yeah,
I am in catalyzing something to happen.
yeah.
And so from that standpoint, I people, because this is a discussion I have often in just groups of social groups and in discussion groups, and that is, can astrology really change the future? And my answer is no, but astrology can change the past. And I'll say more about that in a moment.
Yes, do, because can it change the past?
Oh, absolutely.
The past has already been, and
No,
I agree
that's an
about the
illusion.
future
That's an
because
illusion. The past only exists in the present moment.
say more
And
about that.
well, have you? I know you're British, and a cup of tea trumps the therapist. But have you ever been to therapy?
I have.
All right. So, what's the purpose of therapy?
The purpose of therapy for me was to understand why I behaved the way I did.
And the verb there was be was what?
I did
No, the word was why I be,
behaved like I
and
did.
that verb that you used was in the past tense.
It was.
And
It
so
is.
so it's my contention, that is supported by all the astrological or all the psychological training that I've had, and I've had extensive, um, is that therapy is basically about recreating and rewriting and re-understanding the past, so that we don't repeat patterns that were previously invisible. This is what Freud called the
Yeah,
neurosis.
yeah.
That was a pattern that was based upon an untruth that we thought was true. And so we go into these repetitive cyclical patterns of doing them again and again. And so what we do is we change our history, which then changes our view of the present moment, which then gives us choices that we didn't have. And that's what changes our trajectory into the future.
That's really interesting. I come from a slightly different understanding about that because for
Yeah.
me, I don't think you. I think that the past is what's happened, and you change your relationship to what happened. You can't change the
Well,
past because it happened, but you can change your relationship. You can change the shame, the guilt, the
So,
or
Sue, let me ask you this. And again, as I bring, my American perspective to this, but for example, as a kid, I grew up celebrating Thanksgiving as this amazing holiday where we had discovered this new land, and these people who lived here helped us and gave us food, and this is a remembrance of the thanks that we give to being invited into their land, only to rewrite that past and learn that there were 250 million people, or 250 million people already here living happily, and we killed them,
yeah.
and we feasted with them once, and then we killed them. you know and so what is the past? The past is always only based upon our, even when we have facts, we don't have a past, we have a perspective of the past that we change. And what you're saying is true. We're changing our relationship to the past. However, what I'm saying is that's the only thing that the past is our current relationship to the past, because those events that happened are all mythological now, even in our personal lives,
I
even in the horrific
mm,
childhood horrors that we might have had growing up, and we feel like as we grow older and we get different perspective on them, it's not that we're just changing our view of the past. Our past is changing.
I'm going to come. I completely understand where you're coming from with this. I'm just going to chuck something else in here. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not disagreeing. I
No,
mean, I
no,
think
I
ultimately
get
we're
that,
saying
nor
the
am
same
I,
thing,
but
but
I'm
yeah,
just,
okay.
this is a slightly different perspective again, because for me, it's about the truth. It's, it's when the scales fall off your eyes and you just go, oh my God, I had not seen it like that before. It's
Okay.
when the adult realize it wasn't their fault their father abused them. It wasn't their fault. It's the
Exactly.
it's that moment of understanding, deep understandings. It goes, the depth of the core of your being. This is this is my truth. But it doesn't change the fact the father, let's say for an example, was an abuser. It doesn't change that, but it changes your relationship to that.
Well, I'm suggesting that although we would like to think that there's a truth with a capital T, that all history is made up of truths with little
Little
t's,
tease.
and in fact, as you were saying that, I was just bear with me here a second.
Okay.
You were saying the past. The thought came and went. It'll
Okay.
recycle. But what I'm saying here is that when we change our relationship to the past, that is
Yes.
the
Yes.
past. That again, we can look at the facts that um um that England came to the United States and set up this colony that then became a country. Those are facts. But when
Yes.
we look at those facts, we tell them from the perspective and the point of view of what we were taught to hold that perspective, which was we were given the authority to come here and make this land ours, and therefore everything that we did was right. And you can't change what it is that we did. I'm not saying that,
Yeah, no, I get
but
it.
but by changing your relationship to those specific
Yes,
events,
that's
the
it.
events themselves are different.
Okay, I think we're just splitting hairs here.
Eh, anyhow, regardless of all of that,
Yeah,
and by the way, this same thing, as far as I'm concerned, informs my understanding of past life regression or past lives in general, because time, when we're not in a physical body, every mystical tradition on the planet has the same understanding that unless we're in a body, everything that ever existed and everything that ever will exist exists simultaneously. The universe is like a 40-volume Encyclopedia Britannica.
yeah.
You can only pull out one volume and open to one page at a time, but it's all going on. And that past lives aren't in the past. If we're experiencing it in the present moment, they are in the present moment.
Yeah.
And there's no linearity. The soul doesn't do this and then this and then this and then this, and now we're here and that's the end of the
Yeah.
line. That's a limited way of
Well,
understanding
it's
it.
a linear way, and the linear way is because it's how we live. We live in a linear way. We
Not us
born and then we
astrologers. We
die.
live, but us astrologers have broken out of linearity,
Yes.
and we live in an orbital, in a cyclical realm, where we understand that time is cyclical.
Yeah.
But once you take that leap into the cycling of time, let's just say taking someone's chart or your own life and going back to birth, and marking Saturn when it first conjoined your moon, and then when it squared your natal moon, and then opposed it, then squared it, then conjoined it, then squared it, then opposed it, and
Yeah.
you tell that story, all of a sudden you realize that those things that are, 6, 7, 8 years apart through your life that create these events on some level is really all one event.
Yeah, I mean, Rick, thinking about the evolution of this, which is certainly where I'm coming from, the evolution of experience and consciousness and whatever that means to each one of us. Where are you?
Yeah.
Where are you with death and dying, and the concept that there is death, there isn't death, or that there is a flow of consciousness? Where are
So
you?
one of the lectures that I've given in several different I want to say incarnations, but that's like a double entendre there. But one of the lectures that I've given in various forms over the past few years is called Consciousness Con Carne. And because ultimately, one of modern science has several axioms that need therapy because they're untrue. And science, which is a system of thought based upon repeatability, is actually a neurosis, and because it has to keep repeating the same thing because it's built upon some untruths, just like a Freudian neurosis. And one of the things that I think about when I think about um, one of the faulty what's the right word, foundational, I guess axioms is a right word, of modern science, is that evolution, basically inanimate became complex forms, became animate, became single cell or viruses, then bacteria, and more complex forms until we had, single cell animals like paramecium and things of that sort. And then this evolutionary process kept becoming more and more complex until the electrical systems developed what we now call a nervous system, until at some point in time something happened and we developed consciousness. And that consciousness was a thing that happened on the evolutionary scale, maybe somewhere between a mammal and an ape and a human and a Homo sapien or whatever. But that consciousness is a byproduct of mechanical complexification. And anyone who has studied the Eastern modalities and anyone who really understands how it works knows that it's exactly the opposite. And that is that thought is pre-existent to matter. In the beginning, what was there? There was the word, and this is not meant to be a biblical, proclamation, but even the Bible says that what happened was there was nothing, and then something vibrated, and it wasn't the word. The word in Aramaic and in Greek is logos, and logos we think of as logic, but that's not what logos is. Logos is the vibration of something that was pre-existent, that when it vibrates, it manifests into reality. And so my overriding, underwriting question that has driven my work in astrology for 55 years is, how does meta become physical? In other words, here we are, you have a life, you have a home, you have a family, you have people, you have friends, you have clothes, you have books, you have cars, you have ideas, you have history. That is a constellation of your energy. And yet at one point in time, you didn't exist. And there you were as a single cell or a couple of cells. And then the complexification happened. How does something manifest from no thing? And that is the real question. And I know the answer. And it's not about hubris, I know, but the answer is that vibration manifests as physical form. Thought is vibration. Consciousness precedes materiality. As you shall be as you think. Change your thought, change your mind. That changes the reality.
And
And
we want,
so the idea here is that it's really important to understand that consciousness does not require animating meat to be conscious. Consciousness does fine without physicality.
are we talking here about the morphic resonance?
We could. Thank you,
Field or
Rupert.
whatever
Thank
you
you.
want. I think that
Thank you, Rupert.
Sheldrake work.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Rupert Sheldrake.
absolutely. And
Yeah, yeah,
that's where I feel very strongly
yeah.
attached to. I think that answers a lot of questions for me. And the concept that the world is a panpsych the universe is the quality of panpsychism. It's alive,
So we don't,
vibrating.
as much as I adore Rupert Sheldrake as a human and his writing. I think his book, The Presence of the Past, of all of his books, is perhaps, I mean, the stunner. Although his work is good, but morphic resonance, although he coined that binary term, um, it's what Pythagoras said. Pythagoras said
Yeah.
all is vibration, and he said all vibrations arise in sympathy, in sympathetic harmony with other vibrations. And you see, here's where astrology fits into this whole thing. And we'll cycle back to alchemy here in a moment, because we as astrologers are at a transformational point that most people don't understand. I mean, everyone knows that the astrology we're doing now is different than the astrology that we did 50 years ago, 100 years ago, certainly in the formation of the Vedic or Hellenistic phase, even though all those things are incredibly important. But the transition that we're going through right now is an absolute 100% analog to what scientists had to go through in their understanding of quantum physics. And it's this. I mean, it's one of many pieces of this puzzle. But when you look at a planet, when we as astrologers draw up a map, we're drawing up a map with, depending upon what school of thought we use, we're mapping 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 25 different points on a radial graph. That's what we use, what we call a horoscope, which of course, as we know, is just Greek for view of the hour, like telescope is a view of afar, horo, hour, scope is to see. That when we look at the view of an hour and make that map, what we're doing is we're putting points on that map. Are you with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So in quantum physics, going all the way back to the Greeks and the atoms of Democritus, the breakthrough was, wow, this entire world is built upon these little teeny tiny submicroscopic Legos that
Yeah.
fit together, that make everything. And that's what we thought for 2,000 years.
Well, we're talking about the world soul concept here, aren't we?
No, well, yes, we are. But what I'm talking about
Yeah,
is what quantum physicists would call the particle wave duality.
right.
The infamous double slit experiment that clearly shows that light travels like a wave, but when you measure it, for the moment that you measure it, for that one moment, the wave appears to be a particle, but it
And
travels like a wave. Let me finish this thought here,
sorry, go.
because now we're going to come back to, so Einstein won the Nobel Prize for proving that light is a particle. It's a photon, and yet there's unquestionably it propagates like a wave, electromagnetic waves. So the question now, as astrologers, we're creating maps with these points in them, particles.
Mm.
What about the fact that when I'm not looking at the particle, when I'm not measuring it, the moon is humming at 13 cycles a year. Saturn is humming at 20 at 3 cycles a century. Pluto is humming at 4 cycles a millennium. That the planets are waves unless we measure them, and the wave becomes a particle. When I look up at the sky and I see the moon, I saw the moon conjunct Jupiter a couple of nights ago, and they're particles. I call them BFPs, big fucking particles. But they're still particles. But they're only particles when we measure them as particles. Otherwise, they travel as waves. And the breakthrough that we're seeing in astrology that computers are allowing us to work with, and some of this, the Hindu astrologers were aware of it when they did divisional charts. Certainly cosmobiology, Uranian, the fourth harmonic wheel, was aware of this. Certainly John Addy, and his breakthrough work on harmonics, David Cochrane in vibrational astrology. This is all just an artifact of a tip of an iceberg because our understanding of planets is no longer limited to planet as particle.
Yes, I'm definitely with you, and I get
Which is why music is so important for
yes,
me, because
yes,
like Pythagoras, who said everything is vibration, remember, this is the same dude that came up with the idea of dividing an octave into 12, oh, interesting number, into 12 equal segments, calling that a scale, and understanding that there was a spatial relationship between the vibration, and if you half the length of the string, you double the frequency, and that's an octave. This is Pythagoras, and it's what happens on the planetary level.
So this brings me on to the dodecahedron, which is the 12-sided
Yeah.
shape, which is said to be the shape of the universe.
Well, it's the most complicated. It's the most complicated three-dimensional form made out of only one shape. The problem with that, though, is that Buckminster Fuller came along and took the dodecahedron and turned it into an icosahedron, into a what do they call it? A stellated dodecahedron. I'm not using his exact words here. I'm sorry, but it basically ends up with, instead of the hexagons that make up the 12 sides of it, by putting pentagons around it, giving it three-dimensionality and creating that shape that we call the soccer ball, that pattern. And in fact, it's the shape of carbon-60, which is a three-dimensional spherical, carbon atom or carbon molecule. And so, Plato was brilliant, but a dodecahedron was still more simplistic than it may ultimately be. Geometry, sacred geometry is magical, and I don't know that the shape of the universe is actually as simple as a dodecahedron, because part of the problem is that when we divide things by 12, when we go to a 12-sided figure, when we go to a 12-fold zodiac, the first victim of that 12-foldness is the loss of the magic of the divine proportion, the golden ratio, the sacredness of the five-pointed star. And this very significantly actually goes all the way back to the rise of the alphabet and the rise of the left brain processing linear alphabet, right hand, and the downfall of the matriarchy. There's a wonderful book by this man named Leonard Schlein, who is a professor of surgery for his entire adult career at Stanford University, died a couple of years ago. But he wrote this magnificent book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess. The reason why this is important as astrologers is that we've created a world based upon the right hand. The left hand is sinister. And you see the
Oh,
left hand, right brain,
in again, aren't
the,
we?
the left hand and right brain is in a way metaphysical because it's simultaneous emotional processing of time, whereas the left brain and right hand is the spatial three-dimensional world. And so what's happened in Plato's works too, because is that we lost the connection with the geometry of the metaphysical. Now, Johannes Kepler actually had the brilliance to say that there were two gems, precious gems in mathematics and geometry. One of them was Pythagoras's law of the right triangle. You know, the a squared plus b
Yeah,
squared
yeah,
equals c
yeah.
squared. And Kepler said that was a diamond. But he said the law of the mean and the extreme, which is the golden mean, the proportion of this is to this, as this is to the next thing, where this plus this equals the next thing. It's where the multiplication and adding of the universe comes together. And Kepler said that was the other precious gem. That was an emerald, he said. And so the point is that in the rush for going to regular geometry, Platonic mathematics, and the 12-fold dividing a circle by 3, 4, and 12, we lose the magic of 5. And now we come to the magic of alchemy and to that which we don't see when we're looking at what Deepak Chopra calls the problem with modern science is it suffers from its belief in the medieval superstition of materialism. Great line.
Which we know, but I think this is what's breaking down, and I think astrology is playing a really big part in that.
Yes, and yes.
Greg, it's been calling us. There's
yes,
no
yes, and yes. But the golden mean itself, the Egyptians knew it was the secret to the access to the metaphysical realms. The Great Pyramid has the golden mean. You know, Giza, all the old pyramids. In fact, the stonemasons, which was of course a real union of people who did stonemasonry, that part of their secret initiate tradition was, and they built all the old temples all through, England and Western Europe, and that the ratio of every window, every room, every anteroom to the larger rooms were always 1 to 1.62 or 1.618 because the golden mean was built into everything. In the Great Pyramid at Giza, if you measure from the tip of the pyramid down one side to the middle of that side, that's called the apothem, and then you measure from that point to the base, a corner, and you divide the height, the slant height, the apothem, by the distance to the corner, it's 1.61803 to some crazy decimal place. So the point here that I'm making is that the 5-pointed star has been an access to soul, and even Kepler understood this, even though he couldn't go to the sevens. He didn't have a computer. Calculating seventh harmonic is a pain in the ass without pushing a button and just seeing it, to this. So if planets are particles and waves, planets, like all waves, make hums with each other. That's why aspects work, or there's flowing aspects, and it's all based on sacred geometry and how the music of these very, very low frequency things that are so low frequency we can't hear, but it's how these waveforms interfere with each other or resonate with each other. All right, so here's the thing. It takes Venus 224 and a half days to go around the sun once. It takes the Earth 365.24 days to go around the sun once. 365.24 divided by 224.5 is 1.62. Venus is the golden mean hum musically to Earth, which is why they create the 5-pointed star, because that golden mean ratio is inherent in the production of a 5-pointed star.
Yes.
But Venus is the planet of love, of beauty. Well, it has to be. It is the golden mean ratio to Earth.
Isn't that fantastic? Did you know that the Native American Indians have, for their sixth sense, is beauty?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they pray to beauty. It is beauty within, beauty without, beauty around. I also think about beauty. I think it's when we feel really alive. When we
Yeah.
don't feel alive, we're not in tune to that something that makes life beautiful. Does that make sense to you?
Well, not only does it make sense, but now we come back to the whole concept of world soul, because according to Plato, there was a very, very, very specific difference between spirit and soul.
Yes.
Spirit is masculine, it's ascending, it's fire and air. Spirit moves towards the heavens. Soul moves into the body.
One
Soul is water and earth. Spirit is masculine, soul is feminine. When we talk about the world soul, you see, soul is metaphysical,
it wants
but
to
it's
incarnate.
well, it doesn't.
Or
Yes, it does incarnate. Exactly. Yes, exactly. And I love the William Blake line that where he's kind of trashing Christianity for thinking that body and soul are separate in his Marriage of Heaven and Hell, where I'm saying that Christianity says that following the energies of body or evil is punishable by eternal damnation. He goes, whereas the following is true. And what he wrote is, whereas the following is true, that body is merely that portion of soul we can discern with our five senses, which are the chief inlets of soul in this age. That body and soul are one, and that body is merely that portion of soul that we can perceive through our five senses, which are the chief inlets of soul in this age. And the ages are, in fact, changing, and we are more aware as a culture of soul than Beethoven or Blake or people were, in the early 19th century, because they were distracted by trying to stay alive in the material world. We kind of don't have that problem
Yeah,
on the same level.
we live with a tension, though, don't we, of the soul incarnating. We're needing the experience for whatever reason, maybe to grow, to learn, whatever, and the spirit wanting to ascend. And I think
Absolutely.
we're always walking this tightrope of the yearning to go home and the yearning to be here. It's a
Yeah.
really it can be extremely painful tension. And if we don't understand that, that's really difficult, makes life difficult.
Yeah. 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 But of course, the tension is an illusion, and it's the fear of the fall off that tightrope, that is the fate that we actually seal for ourselves. Um,
Is it,
and back to the
sorry, can I just jump in here? I've just had a thought.
oh,
Our
sure.
chemical process is all about that tension.
It's all about it's about the point at which the metaphysical and physical interact.
Yes,
Yes.
100%.
Um, but I'd come back to my belief that the tension is an illusion, which is what one might call enlightenment or liberation, when one is at various moments in life
Yeah,
temporarily freed from that tension, which might happen at the moment that the Tibetans call the moment of clear light, which is the moment of death or orgasm or
yeah,
little
yeah,
death,
yeah,
or
sure.
it's very much a piece of that same puzzle. Say that, but on some level, astrology is actually the corpus callosum that connects space and time, or that connects the right hand, left hand, or left brain, right brain, or that connects art and science, or that connects thinking and feeling, or logic and intuition, or however you want to frame it, spirit and soul, if you will. And that the renaissance that we're experiencing right now which has been at least partially energized by the reclaiming of our history through Arhat and Project Hindsight, and and the translation of material from the Aramaic, from the Greek, from the Arabic, from the Hebrew, from the Sanskrit. That's been feeding it from one side, and from the other side, we have the modern quantum physics framework that is feeding it from this other side of modernism, that is hitting with computers and artificial intelligence. And I mean, we haven't seen nothing. We haven't seen anything yet. When we get to a point of, I mean, I believe pretty strongly that within 5 or 10 years we'll have something that we'll call, let's call it TPS. Now, if you got in your Wayback Machine and went back 15 or 20 years ago, and someone says, "Well, what does your GPS say?" You'd go, "What's GPS?" And GPS is simply a spatial or global spatial, positioning. Well, TPS is temporal positioning systems. Now, it may not be called astrology. It may be some invention by some engineers at Cambridge or at Stanford or some damn place, saying that we've discovered some new kind of gravitational wave and we can calculate when the right times are to do right things, and we can put it into an app, and you don't have to know anything about anything, but just feed in your biography. Artificial intelligence will tell you whether you should wait 3 minutes before you make this next phone call. Temporal positioning systems, TPS. It's vibration. It's all vibration.